everybody, and welcome back to EBNet Stream. We recently published an article from SOLmate regarding digital wallets and the opportunity that this presents to grow financial inclusion. I thought I'd reach out to Jonathan Holden, who's the COO of SOLmate, and have a conversation around these talking points to see what we could learn. Jonathan, welcome to EBNet Stream.
Thanks, Natalie. Thanks for having me.
No problem. As I mentioned before we started recording, I know nothing about digital wallets. I feel quite fancy when I tap my phone and pay. So perhaps you can take the first couple of minutes and explain a little bit about what it is you do.
I think the term digital wallets is used quite freely nowadays, and for some people it means different things. If you pay money to Uber, for example, and then you pay for your rides out of that wallet, some people will refer to that as a digital wallet. In our world at SOLmate, it is pretty much a complete banking solution, but it's not a bank, or it's not a bona fide bank account. We are licensed differently, and we operate under certain restrictions and limitations. But for all intents and purposes, it's a digital app that you download, and you can then pay money into it, and you can see your balance in real time, and you can pay outwards depending on what you need, whether you have a linked card to it, or whether you pay for electricity, or whether you're paying your friend for your rent. There's a multitude of services that we offer, and essentially it's digital currency. So people are avoiding cash where possible. There's a big drive in the market to take cash out of the market. Some people may have even seen that in shops like Woolworths and what have you that don't accept cash anymore. So there's a drive in the economy and the market to remove cash because it is inherently risky. It's also expensive. If you think about the cost of producing cash, it needs to be recycled every so often, whereas digital currency remains forever in reality. So that's really what it is in our world. And we provide a solution for people that either like our solution over a conventional bank account, or people that can't get a conventional bank account, that don't have the necessary paperwork or the banking track record. These sorts of solutions, because of their limitations, are easier to apply for with lower documentation requirements.
The mention of a bank account made me think, would I call these individuals the unbanked? I often read that word unbanked. I mean, would they be swept up in that definition?
Yes. So people refer to unbanked communities in South Africa. Historically disadvantaged people, I would guess, people living in rural areas where there's no traditional banking infrastructure. So if you have to travel 50 kilometers to your nearest bank branch, the likelihood of you actually being a regular bank customer is very slim. Whereas as long as you have a signal, in other words, Wi-Fi or 3G or something, you can actually bank wherever you're sitting in the world.
So this, to me, in my mind, and this is what drew me to have a conversation with you today, is this in my mind opens up opportunities for an industry like ours, being investments, employee benefits, and insured benefits around funeral, death, disability, etc. I see you nodding, so I'm obviously on the right track. But perhaps you can expand a bit on how you see our industry perhaps implementing this type of tech into what we do.
Yeah, it's we're currently aiming at the low income sector because traditionally they're underserved and underbanked. I think it's a progression or a journey that we want to be part of as well, and we're at the start of it. But financial literacy and financial independence is, to my mind, a kind of tiered or staged process where you need the literacy initially and the means to store money and understand how to save and to spend. So you need that basic education. And when you start to accumulate wealth, you need to secure that wealth. And that comes through things like insurance products, investment products. You need to grow your wealth above above nominal returns. Otherwise, inflation will just eat into your wealth eventually. So that progression and I would call more sophisticated products is part of the journey. And I think I told you last time we chatted, but we launched a sort of compulsory funeral scheme, which all of our customers got funeral cover as long as they paid their monthly fees. And it didn't have the attraction that we thought. One of the reasons or the objections thrown to us is that I already have funeral, or I've got too many funeral products. And it is a reality that people sometimes do have 5 or 6 products. Sometimes they have 5 products they don't even know they have.
Yeah.
So I think it's an industry or a sector that's been a little bit abused in the lower income sector, where every single provider or retailer adds a little bit of funeral. So people have developed a bit of a mistrust around it, quite honestly. So that's something we need to work on. And we do intend to come back with a voluntary product rather than a compulsory product, and then obviously grow more slowly, but with people that are really interested and that understand the value of it. So to me, everything always comes back to education and educating the customer on the actual value of why they want something that you're trying to sell.
I love the term financial literacy and inclusion that you used in your answer there. And let's hone in on that a little bit more. Have you guys ever kind of played in the space of financial literacy with your product?
We have. We've at one stage, I think from a PR perspective, you go through phases of, thought leadership, and then maybe financial education, and then maybe back to just raw product, and so it ebbs and flows. So we've been through that space. Again, when you look at your sales results on the back of that kind of initiative, it's difficult to say whether it really adds from a sales and growth perspective. I think it certainly adds value to customers that buy into it. But the one thing that dawned on me was that just by the very fact that people are using our product, and maybe when you first get it, it's not that obvious, but once you play around, you begin to understand, oh, I see, okay, that's how I make an EFT, and that's how I transfer money to my card. And when I swiped my card today for lunch, I see that 20 Rand has come off. And there's a 1 Rand charge. So they start to literally educate themselves on how banking systems work just by using the product. And that wouldn't be possible unless we had people signing up. Our sign up is free, so the initial kind of barrier to entry isn't there. But obviously, once you've played around and understand how it works, you would need to deposit money to enjoy the features. But I do believe there's kind of hidden education in simply using the product. Remember, just from my own background, I remember when I got my first job, I'd never used Excel. It maybe shows how old I am, but I was put in front of this desk and told, there you go, and there's Excel. And I literally had to play around in it, teach myself, maybe ask the person next to me. But that's the best way to learn. So I think people are doing the same with these types of products in the market.
Something that kind of resonates is possibly practice with the tech and practice seeing the money flow, like you say, sensitizes people to the use of money. What happens? It actually gets deducted. Oh, it's not a gift. I have to repay, or I have to pay, and I pay fees. It's interesting to me to talk a little bit about your demographic, because for us in the savings industry, we obviously see a very low level of savings amongst your demographic. And what lessons do you think you've learned in your financial literacy attempts that you think you could share with us, and maybe we could not make the same mistakes you did?
Yeah, I think it's well known that in South Africa we don't have a savings culture. But I think there's a reason for that, and it's the general, per capita income and what people need to survive. And I think savings is actually to some extent achieved in other ways. So people don't save their money on our platform or perhaps anywhere else for that matter, but they do send money home.
Yes.
So they send money to Zimbabwe or Ghana or wherever they happen to be from, and that money is used to build houses, to buy farming implements, to build small businesses, to keep families going. So whilst it's not saving, it's investing in, the future in another way. That's very typical of our demographic. And then unfortunately it is hand to mouth living. So we are gradually going up the ladder in terms of income level. We get some people telling us strangely that they use our product for saving. I think it's more a case of I don't want to have the cash under my mattress. I'll keep it there. We don't currently pay interest, so it's not true, interest-bearing savings, but it is a safe storage where people know it's going to be safe, it won't get stolen, and they can use it when they need it.
And if you could give one piece of advice around product design, I get that the savings culture is bad, and I love this concept of investing in a different way. And if you could maybe share some insights into products that you feel this demographic would appreciate and value.
So I think insurance is the logical first thing. There is value there. Obviously, we've talked about the funeral, maybe even some sort of life products. People are starting to realize the value of those. I think people like products where they can invest small amounts,
yes,
but into kind of real tangible, maybe like unit trust type investments where you feel like you really are accumulating something meaningful, but in small doses. I think some people are scared off by the fact that, or they have this misconception that you need a lot of money up front in order to invest successfully. So any kind of product around that where it's incremental. I know some of the bigger banks have started to scrape your cents off your balance and put it into a savings account, which I think is very innovative. You don't notice the cents when they're gone, but after a year, it's quite meaningful. So it's sort of innovating in that space and making sure people are starting somewhere at least, rather than just never starting at all because of the apprehension. So yeah, those sort of products, I think people are always looking for reward mechanisms. So a lot of businesses now offer rewards. People expect it. So the thinking is, well, if I'm going to put my money with you and spend my money via your channels, then what do I get back? So it really is a consumer mentality that we see and every other business sees, that customers are now expecting something back rather than, I know I have to pay a monthly fee. They're now demanding something back in return. So we have to add value and we have to create those partnerships, whether it's with retailers or just simple cashback. Excuse me, too much talking. We do intend to implement our own cashback reward scheme later this year, as an example.
And to wrap up and bring this back to a retirement fund context, so we may find that retirement funds obviously have a vast demographic of members, and are often sending out I'm going to call it standardized communication. So they're sending out newsletters to members talking exactly about what you're talking about, the incremental growth. Don't be intimidated by savings. You won't notice the cents, but it doesn't seem to be landing at this lower, I'm going to call it a lower demographic. Any tips or tricks you could share with trustees in terms of the design or the distribution of that kind of material?
I would, so it's very tricky challenge. I've been a trustee of a pension fund myself, and you see people, withdrawing their money and resigning intentionally just to get their hands on it. Very, very sad, spiral, I suppose. But I would think just some real practical examples of, Mr. A invested 50 Rand a month. And when he retired 25 years later, he had this, kind of put it into real kind of layman's story, rather than charts and graphs and percentages and that sort of thing, which to people that aren't financially literate, it is scary. So I just think real practical examples is probably the best way to go.
Thanks, Jonathan. That's great insight, and thank you for taking your time this afternoon to spend with us on EBNet Stream. I've really appreciated our conversation. So, Jonathan Holden, the COO of SOLmate, thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Thanks very much. Hope it's been interesting and helpful.